Representative Stephanie Mickelsen from Idaho Falls serves on the Resources and Conservation Committee, the State Affairs Committee, and the Transportation and Defense Committee. She joins us this week to talk about a proposed constitutional convention, tax and budget cuts, and her legislative priorities. So thank you so much, Representative Mickelsen, for joining us here today. I want to just start with this question. It's a question that we ask everybody, but what's the general atmosphere been like in the legislature this week? What are some of the main events that have happened, and what's the environment been like?
Well, I think the environment is kind of tense, if you will, because we have a kind of an struggle going on right now. We have a JFAC committee co-chairs that cut budgets, not because it makes sense or strategically and surgically. They're just wanting to cut, and they'll claim it will be prepared for a recession, when in fact we are not in a recession. We are in a situation where, because of choices that were pushed down upon us last year, we're $450 million in tax cuts, and then did $50 million in school choice, and then they backed into the revenue number. So then they ended up having almost a swing between what they thought they were going to have and what they had. And then, like I said, backing into your revenue number, meaning you go allocate for all your budget items, do a tax cut, and you do a school choice thing, and then you come into your revenue number. No operates like that, but that's exactly what happened last year. So then when we got to the first of the fiscal year, the governor had % holdbacks, which I think that will be enough for us to get through. We may not have any extra at the end of our fiscal year. Be fine. And the JFAC co-chairs and the leadership are trying to push cuts just for the sake of cuts, not necessarily because it's good governance or because it's the right thing to do at this point. We're talking about cutting things like state police funding. We're talking cutting schools. It will be transportation. So we will have road and bridge, that will basically have no money to go do road and bridge projects all summer long, things like that. We have budget stabilization funds, which we might have to use if we don't do all these cuts for a short period of time and then be able to back. But we are by no means in a recession, and by no means do we need to go through with the chainsaw budgets without a real strategic plan of why we're doing that. Now, if Idaho had lots of roads, we weren't in where our roads and bridges are 50 to 100 years old, that might be something different, but that's not what's going on right now. So feeling is kind of tense. I think they've intentionally held some budgets back because I think they're now afraid that they unilaterally, without the body, started trying to make all these tax cuts. And now I think they're starting to realize that maybe they have a problem. And they also didn't follow the protocol in the committees themselves. And then, of course, you have what I like to refer to as a lot of crazy abounding in the building with everybody's grand ideas, but they're really not constitutional and they run them anyways. So that's kind of what's going on. We've had a bathroom bill or two, some transportation bills. We had a currency bill for campaigns. Last year, I tried to run a transparency bill and it shut the House down. Well, today they tried to have one because what we've had in the past is they have had individual members that are going to run for office, and so they want to make sure no competition files to run against them. And they'll say they put 50 or $100 in their campaign accounts when in fact they haven't. So there was a bill that they would have to actually show that they'd put that money in there. And the hard right didn't like it because anytime transparency comes into question, and the people that demand transparency everywhere suddenly don't want it on themselves. So go figure that one out.
And as you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you sit on the State and Affairs Committee, which helps to pass legislation to oversee elections. And I know that you just mentioned that transparency effort. Is there any other bills or priorities that you're trying to get passed for the upcoming elections in 2026?
There's a couple of bills. There's one that actually says you have to live in your legislative district for 120 days leading up to the filing date. In the past, that the law actually read if you had to live in that district. Well, I don't think that's a very good standard by which we should allow people to run for office, that they have the intent that someday they might live there. I think they need to actually live in their district to be able to file for office. So that was a bill. That one passed the House yesterday, I believe. And then, like I say, we had this transparency one about some campaign finance. There was another bill that came through, or two this morning. One of them was about that they would rotate the names on the ballots every so many ballots. So if you had a last name of like Wheeler, you would be on the bottom of the ballot all the time. But the way they're supposed to do it randomly, every so many ballots, then it would change a different spot on the ballot within your like legislative district if you were running against somebody. So your name wouldn't always be the second name. It might be the first name, or, something like that. So that was one of them. And I think there was another one this morning, but I can't pull it out of the top of my head at the moment. So.
And with the legislative...
Go for it. I was just going to say, one thing I don't think most people realize, Idaho has very secure elections, has always had very secure elections. There has been a bill that somebody has introduced that you couldn't, if you were missing your ID, you wouldn't be able to sign an affidavit saying, I am who I say I am, and vote. They would take away that right. And we just don't have a problem with it, and we don't have very many people to access that. But there are times that people have lost their ID, or they've had a fire or something like that. And you have to allow for some of those exceptions, but that was one of the bills, and I haven't seen it move yet, but it was introduced at one point.
So aside from sitting on the State Affairs Committee, with the legislative season about halfway over, what would you say are your other main priorities? What are the things that you've been focusing on in the front half, and what do you hope to accomplish with the remainder of the session?
Well, I've actually been working on what I call a large load electrical bill. What's happening is across the country, you've had these AI data centers popping up all over the place. And these big corporations like your Facebooks, Meta, Google, Amazon, all of these are wanting to set up AI data centers because they see that that's where the next wave of tech is going to go. And they want to, be on the leading edge of it. Part of the problem is, and most people don't understand, the amount of electricity that these AI data centers use. I believe it's in Virginia that they've had an exceptional amount of these. And what's happened is the surrounding ratepayers in 5 years, have had their rates go up by 300%. And Idaho is very attractive. We haven't had an overly regulated PUC, nor have we had a lot of demand on our systems. But if you come in and I'll just give you an example, if you have Idaho Power System that's 3,500 megawatts, and you want to get a couple new data centers in here, they want 1,000 megawatts. So within a 5-year period, you would almost double Idaho Power System from AI data centers and things. Well, the existing ratepayers, or what they call the vintage ratepayers, have already paid to have the power lines put in and the substations and the generation capacity. But these new ones coming in have to have a whole lot, and it has to be uninterruptible, and it has to be, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we want to make sure that the existing ratepayers, whether it be irrigators, commercial, or residential, are not bearing the cost of big tech paying the bill so they can generate huge amounts of profits off these data centers. And we are going to probably be introducing this bill on Monday. It may not be the final iteration of it, but we're going to put in some protections for the ratepayers in this state of investor-owned utilities, that they will not have rates socialized across all rate classes. And that's kind of a technical one, but that's kind of what I've been working on. I've also been working on, interestingly enough, a transportation bill. Unbeknownst to most people, in 2018, when they were rewriting some of the statutes concerning fines, fees, and penalties for driving infractions, they somehow missed the part, putting the part back in that said if you didn't pay your fines and penalties, that you would get your license revoked. And so there is now $23 million owed across this state to counties and cities and clerk of the courts for people not paying their traffic violations. So we're going to be addressing that, and we're on version 5. It hasn't been introduced yet, but we've been trying to get it right. So we've been working with all the stakeholders to make sure we get that right before we get it introduced. But I hope to have it ready to go sometime next week.
And shifting the focus a little bit from your specific legislative priorities, could you tell us why you voted for the House Concurrent Resolution 25, which would advocate for a constitutional convention in the U.S. Congress to pass a balanced budget? Could you explain kind of your perspective and your vote on that resolution?
Okay, so in the past, I've always voted against the Constitutional Convention things, but I think we've reached a fevered pitch in the United States, and it's very hard for either political party to have enough will that when it comes to balancing the budget, because everybody has their special project or their special, friend that needs a favor or whatever. And the reality is we have got to fix this for our kids and our future generation. One of the things we've been told, and you could make your argument on any side of this, but the reality is if we get enough states that are saying, hey, we've had enough, I would hope Congress would step up and introduce a balanced budget amendment for the Constitution. We all know that the feds can do a much better job, be more efficient if they wanted to, but it's just gotten so out of control that it needs to be fixed. And we need to, on the federal level, just like we do on the state level, we need to have a balanced budget.
And again, thank you so much for joining us, Representative Mickelsen. I've just got 2 final questions for you. The first one is, what would you say is the best way for your constituents to be involved in the legislative process? And then secondly, what inspired you to run for public office and be in the position that you are now?
So there's a couple ways for constituents to reach me. I have a phone number, 208-715-7770, or they can send an email to smickelsen@house.idaho.gov, or drop me a postcard. I actually sent out a questionnaire to my constituents just this last week or two. I've been getting a lot of cards back. And so that I can reach out back to them, we're going to be having a town hall this Saturday at the College of Eastern Idaho at 7:00. We encourage people to come and tell us. I think the best thing you can do for your representatives or your senators in this state is to reach out to them on issues and help us understand, because different people are affected differently. And so we have to make sure that their voices are heard, not lobbyists and not this, leadership of the House or leadership of the Senate, but we need to know from our constituents so we can go out and so we can make sure that we are listening and sharing their voice with others in this building. The reason I decided to run is my husband and I felt like that we had been richly blessed in our lives, and that this would be our opportunity for a while to give back to our community and to give service to Bonneville County, to the agricultural sector, which is where we come from. And I've had I served as a trustee for the College of Eastern Idaho. I served on ag boards and felt like that there weren't enough ag people left in the legislature. And so it would be time, I should take a turn to share that voice of agriculture, education, families, communities with others across the state. And so far, it's been a really pretty good experience. I think it's been important, as we've had some water problems in the last 2 years, that I was here. I was able to probably make a big difference in ways I wouldn't have been if I hadn't been serving. But as always, I'm grateful for the people of Eastern Idaho for their support of me and for reaching out and letting me know. And I just can't say how grateful I am for the opportunities that I've had here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Representative Mickelsen. We're very grateful that you could join us here today in the studio. Thank you again.